Hello, I'm Pastor Shafer, the senior pastor at Mount Olive Lutheran Church here in Santa Monica, California, and this is Hope Matters. Each week I interview interesting people from around the community, around the nation, even around the world on the theme of hope, because we believe that hope matters. My guest today is Nat Travis, who is Mr. Santa Monica. I've heard you've been called by so many, Nat, and long history of community involvement and service in this city, including being the first African American to serve as mayor of Santa Monica, an early African American police officer, and he's got stories with those things and many more. So welcome, Nat. So glad to have you with us.
Pastor Shafer, it's an honor to be a subject of your interview. And the topic is something that really resonates with me.
Great.
And I came to Santa Monica in 1949. And when you talk about hope matters, we came across the country in a 1948 Ford Woody. Now, we lived in Ohio in a town called Glendale, Ohio. If you go in the National Registry, it is listed. It's a very fine village, created. Big family in the city at that time was Proctor of Procter and Gamble. And the reason it's in the National Registry, it was a planned urban village. Everything was pristine. The blacks lived in the community basically to serve the wealthy. And we had a 3-story brick house, antebellum brick house from the Civil War period with 3 acres of land. And five doors down the street was my elementary school. And I had a nice little red wagon. We would have vegetables, fresh corn, whatever. And as a little kid, I hadn't reached 10 years old. I was selling. I had money in my pocket. So hope does matter, see. And so
what brought you across the country then?
My stepdad worked for a family called the Brodies. Now, the Brodies was a combination of families that Lasker, Edward D. Lasker, was one of the 10 richest men on the planet at that time. I've gone to Paris and seen his name engraved in some of the fine buildings over there for his donations. And so my dad was a butler guy for the wealthy, okay? And so he drove out. They were going to build a house in Beverly Hills.
Wow.
They built this house on Mapleton Drive in Beverly Hills that was one of the first ultra-modern houses back in that period. And it was just gorgeous. And as a kid, I got to go there and I ramble all through the house, and they loved me. And fast forward, where hope matters, 49 to 55, that's a few years, right?
I think it's 6.
I got married.
Okay.
In 1955. And I had a job. I was working for the U.S. Post Office, and I was always a guy that had to stretch out a little bit. And so I asked my dad if I could talk to his boss about borrowing some money. And my dad had my stepdad, but he had a great relationship with me. He always trusted my instincts and allowed me to do things that some people would be afraid to deal with. And so I put on my shirt and tie and I went over to Beverly Hills on Rodeo Drive to Mr. Brody's office, and went into his office and told him that I'd just gotten married and I had a job and I was doing well on my job, but I wanted to impress my wife with a few trinkets and get her started in the right direction, etc. And I'd like to borrow $500. Now he's sitting in this fancy office, big developer, big shot guy. The room between the desk and me sitting in front of him was like bigger than a pool table. He said, he talked to me about my ambitions and my aspirations, and he says, he got on his intercom and he says to his secretary to take care of da da da. Next thing you know, he says, I said, how much interest are you going to charge me? Looked me right in the eye and he says, all I'm asking you is, when are you going to pay it back? If we shake hands as you leave the office, you'll pick up a check for that $500. And that was such a great start. But hope matters. See, that helped us get ourselves started on our family, marriage, et cetera, et cetera. So I in working in the post office, I felt like I needed to do better, and so I decided I was going to apply for a job at the Santa Monica Police Department. And in 1958, 3 years after I'd gotten married, I applied, and it was very successful. And if we follow your theme, hope matters, I was being interviewed by a panel of folks, and I'm serious about this interview and giving them, answering their questions properly. He says, oh, and then one guy says, oh, you don't have to worry, you're taking Leroy's place. And I said, well, I want to ultimately be chief of police. And I said this in 1958. Well, hey, I got the job. Okay. But the funny part about it, I knew the family, the Leroy family was a member of our church. And I knew that he was on the police department. I knew the fellows were on the police department. And having said to the interview committee that, no, I want to be the chief of police, I thought I'd probably never get the job. But I got the job. And fast forward 58, in a couple of years, I became president of the Santa Monica Police Officers Association. And hope matters, see, because being president of the union gave me power you wouldn't believe. I got to meet a guy named Edmund G. Pat Brown.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And we became dear friends, and his son Jerry in the future life appointed me to state commissions and stuff, and so hope does matter, because I'm always hoping for something better.
I've gotten to know you in the last few years through the Human Relations Council, and you are a very positive guy for all the crap, excuse the word, that you've been through in your life. I mean, you maintain. I mean, here we are. For the benefit of our viewers, we're recording this on the day when there are riots in the Capitol, and yet, we still maintain hope in this country and hope for this world. It's not always easy, though, has it been that? I mean,
Well, it's the theme of your interview has to do with hope. And let me just comment on 2020 and all of the COVID-19, the George Floyd situation. Now, I'm a Christian faith, and I believe in God, and I pray, and I do a number of things, but I thought it was fateful that everybody was in their house because of COVID-19, and some police officer somewhere in the country put his knee on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 43 seconds. And the number of Americans that saw that was absolutely unbelievable. And the national response was so powerful to me, because hope does matter. It opened the door for opportunities for race relations to improve in this country rather than further degenerate. And so that was a very positive thing. Now there's still problems going on. We have political issues and so on and so forth, but we had an incredible amount of interest in medical science. We moved forward with developing a vaccine in this country for the COVID situation in times that never would have been anticipated historically. And we're opening doors all over America for improved race relations, diversity, opportunities for all cross section of our country that heretofore never had those opportunities. And I will take Santa Monica as a community and say this. During all these times, we had some tough times. People were in the streets, people were doing things that we wouldn't tolerate, but the motivation was there. Santa Monica created a committee to look into diversity and social justice, racial justice, etc. And out of 100 candidates, I was fortunate enough to be one of 15 on that committee. So my background is varied as far as government is concerned, but I taught 27 years at the university in criminal justice. So there's a number of subcommittees and categories that we worked on. So I chose the law enforcement. And my goal was to peacefully come out with a plan that would allow us to have civilian oversight of our police department with total transparency. And I came up with the 3 T's that I use when I'm talking to people who are, and many times have disparate points of view. I said, I'm a guy who believes in discussion, but I also believe in the 3 T's. And people keep looking at what do you mean 3 T's? I said, well, you have to be surprised if you tell the truth. That's a pretty good T to start with. And if you're having transactions, if those transactions are transparent, that 3rd T comes into play, and it's called trust. Once you can get somebody to trust you, you'd be surprised how disparate points of views can come up with solutions. And so that is one of my strong feelings about things. I'm a partisan, but I don't think I wear it on my sleeve. And I have friends of all parties, and I all used to tell little jokes about my teaching career. I've gone to the diversity program at one of the temples on Wilshire, and we had all kind of folks there. We had law enforcement people, and we had people from the world. One of whom was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And so I interviewed him, and we had a wonderful discussion. When he found out I was from Alabama, I think I became his best friend. Talked about the red clay and all the stuff. And point is, I was taking a class at the time at Cal State LA, where I ultimately went to teach after being in law enforcement. And the class was a sociology class. And so I asked if I could interview him. And I got his trust, Pastor. I got his trust, where he honestly told me his inner thinking and why he belonged to the Klan. And here I am. My face is not powdered. My face is black. But he talked to me like we were good buddies. And I turned in my report, and it was such an in-depth, really fine report. The teacher gave me an A grade on the report and said in red, big red across the bottom after he wrote it, it's fiction, but I'll give you an A because it's well written. And see, but hope always wins out. So me being the kind of guy, I have sort of a weird sense of humor. I went back to the Wiesenthal Center on Pico for another meeting. And lo and behold, my buddy was there. I told him the story, and I says, I want you to do me a favor, and I'll do the transportation for you. I have a class on such and such a night that I have to go to, and I'd love for you to go with me. And don't say a word. Just when I go in, we'll walk in the door together, and I'll tell you to take a seat in the back of the room and don't open your mouth till you hear me refer to you. So we were talking about something, and I said, oh, by the way, Professor so and so, I have a guest with me tonight, and he fits right into our discussion about race and race relations and stuff. He's a member of the Ku Klux Klan. I happen to have written a paper about him. Ah, that was a classic. The class just roared. And anyway, that's me.
Yeah.
And but you can see, if I can talk to him and he can talk to me, that means that we have some commonality, and the blood in our veins flows in similar way. So I have to get a little personal now on the next hope.
Mhm.
1973, I'm home working on something or other, and boy, I just get into pain, and a gallstone or something, that kind of pain. And so I was rushed to the hospital. 1973, I'll never forget it. Professor at Cal State at LA at the time, and Hope Matters. They took the x-rays uh, looking for the gallstone, but they found a massive tumor on my left kidney.
Mm.
And they called, and my daughter took the message, and I got home, call this number regarding such and such. I still kept that message. I had a total nephrectomy of the left kidney in 1973, where they took out a grapefruit size tumor with my kidney encapsulated in the tumor.
Wow.
I missed 19 days of class with this major surgery. Back in those days, you didn't have a laparoscopy. It had two ribs out, opened me up from my navel across my left side. And so I'm laying there one day recuperating, and behind the screen, there's, how the hospitals are. They got this little curtain around your bed. The curtain was jiggling, and it wasn't a nurse, and it wasn't three of my class students had come out. And see, I didn't tell anybody at the university where I was, but I teach criminal justice. So they came out. They had a mirror. They had a little container with powder. They said, we want to relieve your pain. And it was simulating cocaine. I'll never forget that. I kept that mirror for, I don't know, 40 years, but that's Hope Matters, see? And I'm still here to tell you, I'm an octogenarian, but I'll tell you, that cancer, I had ultimately more cancer. And it's a funny thing. You're a pastor, and you know this gentleman's name I'm going to mention. I had prostate cancer, and I had a discussion with my wife before the surgery, and we agreed that our love was stronger than the physical da di da da. And I had a total prostatectomy, so I'm impotent. Okay, and I'm laying in bed upstairs here in my home, and my wife says, you got a visitor. Monsignor Lloyd is here to come to pray for you. Well, Monsignor knows I'm a Baptist, but he's been a friend of mine for years. And to me, that says hope matters. To come into my house and sit there and comfort me, and it keeps me going. And so if you ask about your theme, it's a wonderful theme. It allows you to express things. Now, I have one other thing that I haven't been watching the time, but being a teacher, being a mayor, those are good things. The thing that keeps me going is helping others. Now, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on social media. LinkedIn is one of them. I get a LinkedIn message from a doctor at UCLA. And I'm contacted, and she says, "You gave me an award when you were mayor, and your remarks were so inspirational that I've never forgotten you." Here now, she's a medical doctor. She was a kid when I gave her the award, but I've always felt like if you boost somebody and you let them know that their worth in the world and the community is worthy of them putting in more effort. That was one of the most rewarding things that ever happened to me in the last few years, because for her to acknowledge that, and then we've had 3 or 4 paragraphs on LinkedIn talking to one another.
That's wonderful.
I mean, that's powerful stuff.
Powerful stuff.
And so being an octogenarian, being a person, a 3-time cancer guy, being a guy that's fragile health, I have a defibrillator in my chest and all these things, I'm still here. And I intend to stay here because I have friends like you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
That's well, thank you. It's been wonderful to talk to you. I knew I wouldn't have to ask you many questions and we'd have a conversation, but thank you so much, Ned. I really appreciate the time. And you have kind of shown as you've talked that you have lived your life in hope and for your personal self, for the country, for the city. And you've been a blessing to this community for sure, and to me personally. So I thank you for that. And so glad you could be with me today on the show.
It's my honor, sir. And anything you need from me, always don't hesitate to call.
This goes both ways, my friend. Both ways. All right. Thank you so much. This has been Hope Matters, a production of Mount Olive Lutheran Church here in Santa Monica, California. Our guest today is Nat Travis, who is Mr. Santa Monica, former mayor, former police officer, longtime college professor, and a dear friend of mine. And we've talked today a lot about hope because we believe in a God of hope, and we believe that hope matters. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.